Hello everyone, my name is Farrar Desloge. I go to MCHS, Montezuma Cortez High School in Cortez, Colorado. And this summer I worked with Dr. Petruska in the Mechanical Engineering Department at the Colorado School of Mines. Like I said, I worked at Mines with Dr. Petruska as well as one of his PhD students, Rich Pratt, on two main projects, a NASA rover that they're going to build in the future, and then Jackal robots, which I will explain later. So first off, the projects I worked on, the NASA rover, which was with Petruska, Rich, and Lunar Outpost, which is a Front Range-based company. Its whole purpose is to compact the regolith, which is moon dirt. You saw that on Elise's, that's the test chamber. That's that same thing over there. It's very powdery and very difficult to land on. So the whole purpose is to build landing sites for larger spacecraft and with the intention of eventually colonizing the moon. And most of the work I did on it was speccing LiDAR cameras, just like Elise talked about, and which basically they use laser beams to create a 3D model of an environment. And also I use SolidWorks, which is a 3D modeling program, to design a bucket for the robot. And the other project was the Jackal robots. There were these small, pretty small robots, very heavy though. And Petruska's idea was to mount LiDAR cameras as well as computers onto them in order for one of his robotics classes to make autonomous, which is a pretty big task but this is for PhD students, I believe. And next up, the field trips. First off, the EMI, the Earth Mechanics Institute. Dr. Rastami showed us the EMI. They test rocks and drill bits there to prepare for future mining operations. And probably the coolest thing they had there was a 2 or 3 story tall 3D printer that could print full structures out of concrete. The explosives lab, which we toured with Dr. Eliason. It's one of the largest in the country, and they can blow up, I think it's 0.25 grams of TNT. It's a surprisingly large amount. And they use that to study the shock waves from the explosions. And finally, the gas lab. It's a very large gas-powered gun, also by Dr. Eliason, and they use that to test shock waves from impacts. Next up, staying where I stayed over the summer. So I stayed with the Turners in Morrison, Colorado, and Liz and Brandon were the parents, and they had 2 kids, Lucas and Lane. But I lived mostly by myself. I lived in their finished basement, still a basement. But I did mostly all of my grocery shopping and made almost every single one of my meals just to accommodate my dietary restrictions. And I did a lot of mountain biking and a lot of running in the area. It's great trails. Here are some photos. That's biking. That's Remy, their dog. That's the Stanley Cup over there. I went to the Avalanche Parade. And finally, what I learned from my internship. The 2 main things I learned were independence and accountability. I learned how to be independent because I had to cook pretty much everything for myself, do pretty much everything. I drove myself the 20, 30 minutes to my internship every single day on probably the worst highway in Colorado, excluding I-70. And also accountability. I wasn't required to show up every single day except for the occasional meeting, but I still decided to because I wanted to get the most out of my internship. And finally, some advice for future Pinterns. First off, if you're scared of making mistakes, you're not going to learn anything. If you don't want to be paralyzed by fear and not get anything done, making mistakes is part of the process. And secondly, to take advantage of the short time you have. A month or two, however long you get, it might seem like a really long time, but it's really not, and you don't want to regret anything by the end. And finally, just a big thank you to Sarah and all of Pinhead, my host family, the Turners, Dr. Petruska, Rich, everyone else at Mines, and my parents, my mom, my dad, and my stepdad.